Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? Man, I really hesitate to do this in November. I'm serious. I really do. When you're here at November the 15th, what teams, ask you a question, not rhetorical. If you're in your car, say it out loud, or Muse or Paulie answer it. If it's November the 15th and you're talking about the draft or about free agency targets, what teams are typically doing that?
Teams that aren't very good?
Yes, teams that stink. Teams whose season is over. You know who's talking about the draft and free agency right now? The Cardinals.
The Giants?
The Bears. Yes, those are the teams that right now are like, we can draft a quarterback. Who's it? Who are we going to spend our money? That's who's doing it. The Saints are weird because the Saints are bad, but they're also in first place. You're a bad first place team, right? That's why this is weird. Because, yes, if you're the New Orleans Saints, you are in first place, and you are very much in a division race. You lead your division by half a game going into your bye here in week 10. I mean, you're past the halfway point and you're leading your division, so there's so much relevant conversation to this year. But we all know this team stinks. The defense just can't figure it out from half to half. The offense can't figure it out from week to week. Sneaky Pete stinks. Derek Carr's mediocre. Taysom Hill, 1 week, is so elite that his uniform goes to the Hall of Fame, and the next week, it's like, why did he even dress? 1 carry, 2 receptions. Like, what are we doing? They stink. So, whatever. Yes, you're playing to win the division, but you also stink, and if you win the division, you're not going anywhere, so you have to kind of look ahead as well. So, like ESPN's analyst today, it was Matt Bowen and Jeremy Fowler. They put out this sort of early NFL free agent ranking, so players that are going into free agency this year. And so I looked at it from the prism of, okay, well, if you're the Saints going into this offseason, we know the Saints typically have one big ticket free agent item. Usually, they'll spend big on one player. This year was Derek Carr. Like, they'll usually spend big on one player right when free agency starts, and then it's, okay, then you wait for the discount rack. You wait for that big wave of free agency to go, and then you're looking for bargain buys. That's just what the Saints have always done under Mickey Loomis. So if I'm looking at the Saints right now and going, okay, what are the positions that we know are going to be targets this offseason? Well, pretty obvious that offensive line is going to be one, right? When you look at the line, you've got Ramczyk under contract. You've got Eric McCoy under contract. You just re-signed Cesar Ruiz to a 4-year, $44 million deal. So really, center, right guard, right tackle is done, but the left side of your line is a problem. Andrus Peat is most likely, look, Andrus Peat would have been gone this season, but he agreed to a pay cut, and so they kept him. He's likely gone after this year. Hurst is still there. What's his future? Don't know. Really a rotational piece who's starting out of necessity and when he's healthy. And then you've got Trevor Penning, who you invested a first-round pick in, but he looks like a bust. And he's not going to be a left tackle in the NFL. Can you salvage something and play him at left guard? Maybe. Maybe it's what you did with Andrus Peat. But you still need help in the left tackle. The point is you need help at both spots on the left side of the line. And you could use another first-round pick on an offensive lineman. You could do that. Or you get a player in free agency. And so offensive line is one that I looked at. Safety, I think, is very clearly another spot that if you're the Saints, you have to look at. Because you got 2 aging safeties there that just aren't playing great. And if you look at them contractually, Marcus May you have an off-ramp on Marcus May's contract after this season. So he could Marcus May is going to be 30 years old by the time next year starts. It's not to say that he's an old player, but you signed him from the Jets, and he just hasn't been a good player. He missed part of last year due to injury. He's had a suspension, and when he's been on the field, he just hasn't been effective. I could say the same for Tyrann Mathieu, as much as we hate to say that. Tyrann is someone that everybody loves. I mean, he's the honey badger. It was rightly celebrated when the Saints brought him home. But Tyrann's 31 years old, and his level of play is dropped, and you're not good at safety. You missed by letting Marcus Williams get away. You tried to haggle. You'd set your limit of what you'd pay, and you let him get away for pennies, essentially. So you've got to look at safety. I don't care if you believe Jordan Howden can be a future starter or will be a future starter. You got to look at both of your safeties. When you look at them contractually, you have an out for both Marcus May and Tyrann Mathieu after this season, and you're probably going to take it. So safety is a spot that you got to address, draft or free agency. And then the other is linebacker. And it may not be this year, maybe next year, but you're going to have a decision to make at linebacker. Demario Davis is going to be 35 years old in 2 months, and he's still your leading tackler, and he's still the man of God, and he's still playing at an extremely elite level, and I love him. Outside of Drew Brees, this is the best free agent, defensive free agent signing that you had in this era. I mean, I could argue that Demario Davis, outside of Drew Brees, is the best free agent signing the Saints have ever had in any era. He's still playing at an all-pro caliber level as he approaches 35 years old here in a couple of months. I mean, the guy earlier this year was essentially playing on one knee with a knee injury, still out there leading your team in tackles. It's really just a question of, it's not if Demario Davis can still play, it's how much longer does he want to play? He's under contract through next year. So he's got at least another year. So again, this may be a year premature. It's why I put linebacker third. It's not that I'm ready to move on from Demario Davis. He's still awesome. It's just how much does he want to continue playing? That's one. And then Pete Werner is going to be an unrestricted free agent after 24. So typically you don't let a player like that get to unrestricted free agency if you want them to re-sign them, which I assume they will with Pete Werner. So you probably go into this offseason looking to extend Pete Werner. Again, linebacker, the reason I have it third on this list is that linebacker may be the position you look at next offseason, after the 24 season, not right now. But offensive line and safety really are the spots that you have to address. So, when you look at this ESPN piece of the highest graded out or ranked players in the free agent class, it's a lot of defensive linemen. Brian Burns from Carolina, they have number 1 overall. Chris Jones from Kansas City, number 2. I mean, you've invested so much draft capital on your defensive line, it's hard to imagine going there. Kirk Cousins, 3. Christian Wilkins with Miami, number 4. A lot of defensive linemen. Daniil Hunter, number 5. You get in the point, like it's a lot of players on the defensive front. T. Higgins, they rate as 6. Hard to imagine the Saints spending big for a receiver. L'Jarius Sneed, you don't need cornerback help. Chase Young, defensive line. They're at number 8. Josh Allen, edge, defensive line, number 9. Robert Hunt would be the first one that I think you'd take a real look at. Robert Hunt's the offensive guard with the Miami Dolphins. Entering next year, he'll be 28 years old, but he's an interior player. So do you want to invest the money in free agency on an interior player? We've seen the Saints do it before. They did it with Larry Warford when they signed him out of Detroit. And Larry Warford was a declining player at that time. And ultimately, they decided to move on from him whenever they drafted Cesar Ruiz. Listen, we don't need to have a conversation about whether they hit or not with Cesar Ruiz. He's been a starting player. He's been available. He's not been great. I understand they just extended him, but nonetheless. They spent on Larry Warford, which we haven't seen them do a bunch. And Antoine Winfield they rank as the 11th best player. And that's a guy that's still a young player. He'll be 26 years old entering next year. He's been in your division there with Tampa Bay. And this is a top 10 safety in the league. This presumably solves a lot of your issues there at safety. If you have an Antoine Winfield and a Jordan Howden, if you feel like he's able to be a starting caliber player. But you look at the rest of this list: Justin Madubuike, defensive lineman; Mike Evans, wide receiver; Jonah Williams is interesting because that's an offensive tackle. You're there with the Cincinnati Bengals. Do the Bengals re-sign him? Does he stay there? Does he hit the open market? Are you even willing to spend on a player like Jonah Williams? And still, he's a right tackle, so I don't know that the Saints are even interested there because you got Ryan Ramczyk. Saquon, Kendall Fuller, Jonah Jackson, who's an offensive guard with the Detroit Lions. Maybe that's a player you could look at if you're looking for an interior player. I guess the best way I could say it is the hope, the sincere hope, the best case scenario for New Orleans is the light comes on for Trevor Penning, and he could be a left tackle. I don't know that I believe that. I was very hopeful when they drafted him. It sucked that he was injured and missed a bunch of last year. Started this season at left tackle, and you thought maybe after the first week when Arden Key abused him, he had started to improve, but really the run grade even got worse. That's the thing he's supposed to be good at. And right now you got a healthy former first-round pick who's like the reporting is eligible offensive lineman. So that would be a pretty meteoric rise year to year if the light switch comes on for Trevor Penning, but that's a best-case scenario for New Orleans, and then maybe you can go sign one of these offensive guards out of free agency. Other than that, you're probably back in the market in round one drafting an offensive lineman again, which I don't think anybody has the stomach or appetite to see because you've invested so much draft capital on both lines of scrimmage, and you've just missed. You've missed on a number of players that have cost you. But it may be where the Saints are back again. One linebacker to look at, if the Saints do look at linebacker, and I'm not saying they will, but the highest rated linebacker on this list in free agency for this year is Devin White. So I don't know. Look, if Demario Davis and Pete Werner are both back, I'm thrilled. If Demario Davis retires or the Saints decide they're not going to pay Pete Werner and you go sign Devin White at 26 years old, awesome. You basically replace Demario Davis with the next version of Demario Davis, who's your starting inside backer for the next 6-7 years. So, again, it's middle of November. Maybe the only reason I was truly inspired to talk about this today was because it is the Saints bye week, and so we're not previewing a game this weekend. And the Saints are in a division race, and I get it. They're leading their division, but this is also a bad football team that's going to have some serious questions in the offseason. And just because you win a bad division doesn't mean that shouldn't mask all of the insufficiencies that you have. And this team has many of them. And they're going to need to be spenders in free agency to patch some pretty significant holes on this team. They're going to be contenders again soon. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.